What's going on? This is Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, and on the show is Tampa Bay sports legend Keck, who can be heard every Sunday at 10 a.m. on 102.5 The Bone. He is on Hoppe Hour. What's up, Al?
It is an honor for me to be on Hoppe Hour. That's plenty of H's, right?
Yes.
That's a hell of a lot of H's.
I know, it is a lot of H's. Every time the IHOP commercial airs, everybody sends the picture to me letting me know that they're doing Hoppe Hour as if I hadn't known prior. And it might just be a thing where I should take it as a flattering moment that people are reaching out and letting me know. But Al, probably in the 2 years that the Hoppe Hour thing's been going on at IHOP, I've maybe gotten 40 messages of people who are like, why don't you have that name? So it's funny.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, you're putting me in the mood for pancakes.
I definitely
can't eat those right now. So okay. But we can go forward.
So you are a local celebrity. You were a legend on TV. During that time, did it ever seem real or did it go by? You know what I mean?
Well, by the time I got here, I'd been in the business for, at least 20 years. So when you're in this kind of business, remember there is, back then anyway, there were only 3 of my jobs in any given city. So, that changed about 10 years ago. But so wherever I was, it was the same type of situation, and people were always nice. And, you want them to come up and say hello and that type of thing, because that means they're watching you. So, I never saw that as a negative or a pain in the neck. I always thought, for the most part, 99.99% of the times, people are nice and people are wonderful, and it was never a problem.
What year did you come to Tampa Bay? Because I know you were in San Diego prior, correct?
Right. I got here in 1988.
How different was Tampa back then compared to now? Like, obviously, I know there's been a huge amount of changes, but what are some of the changes that you just think of first when you think of how Tampa has grown since then?
Well, when you look at Tampa, okay, here's a perfect example. I remember going in downtown St. Pete, where it's now, where the Vinoy is, and seeing the Vinoy and thinking, now this place was a rat-infested, beat-up, old-ass hotel that was boarded up and no one was going into. And I always thought, well, they could fix that place up and it would really be a great place to stay in. And people would develop this whole area, Well, that's what it is now. And so when you think about, and the big story in St. Pete was about the fact that it was such an old, with so many older residents and such an old feel to it, that they talked about the green benches. And the green benches apparently was some other meaning for geezers, And so it was just so different then. And then you see the way that Harbor Island, you see the way that, downtown St. Pete, all these areas have changed, and it's really become, it's the 13th largest market in the country. And in many ways, when I got here in 1988, it may have been the 13th or 14th largest market, but they didn't see themselves as that. And they certainly didn't act that way. Well, now they're starting to do that. And it's a little more sophisticated. There are so many cool things to do here. And you can really enjoy yourself, even on a Thursday or Friday night. Walking, downtown St. Pete is really cool.
What is your favorite part of downtown St. Pete? Mine is I like going to the different bars by Janice Live, and I also like going to the pier.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. What I enjoy, I used to live on Snell Isle, and so I had a course that I would run right along, the bay and go up to Vinoy Park and run right on the water. And the cool part about it was you could see dolphins swimming and you could see manatees and you could see, incredible things that for a kid from Seattle, Washington, we don't see dolphins, in Seattle, Washington, or manatees or anything like that. And it's just, that part of Vinoy Park and North Shore Park and all that is just so breathtakingly beautiful that we take it for granted. And for so many people that come into the area and see it for the first time, it really is someplace special.
Yeah, I never really realized how much I take this place for granted until I go back home to Illinois. And Illinois is fine, but man, it's pretty depressing there. Like, it's just high taxes. Everything's just more expensive. Like, you don't realize how great the Tampa Bay area is until you leave and go somewhere. Even if it's just for 2 days on an airplane, Al, when you leave Florida, you don't realize how great it is until you leave.
And this part of Florida, it's this part of Florida that is just really phenomenal. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some beautiful places on the East Coast, and Naples is phenomenal, and there's some great places in Sarasota, Longboat Key, and there are, you go up into the Panhandle. Panama City has its moments, and there are so many places I could just keep counting down. But Florida is a special place, and we forget how, because it is getting expensive, at least expensive for us, compared to other parts of the country, it isn't anywhere near like that. And it's just become just a really cool place. I really enjoy it.
Over the years since 1988, what has been the biggest change in the sports part of town, in a way that have the sports fans changed? Is it the same, but it's just a different generation? What's the vibe like when you first got here to being a sports fan now in 2021?
Well, it's completely different. First of all, you didn't have the only professional team that was here, major league type of team, was the Buccaneers. And, soccer had been in and out. And then I'm going to say my first or second year, the Tampa Bay Storm came in. And that was the first tenant in the Florida Suncoast Dome. What was then the Florida Suncoast Dome, obviously what is now Tropicana Field. And again, this is how crazy this area was for sports, because they were selling out arena football in a baseball stadium that had a ton of tickets. And if you went outside a Storm game there in the Florida Suncoast Dome before a game, there would be people scalping Storm tickets, and that's how crazy this area was and how badly it really wanted a pro sports team and just pro sports here. And then you gradually see things start to come around, and you start to see more and more teams, and you start to see how important sports becomes to a community, because that's kind of their calling card. That's kind of, anymore, what people care about, what they want to know about, and what they want to enjoy. And, they can kind of brag. If you're walking into Wichita, Kansas, and you tell people you're from Tampa Bay or Tampa, Florida, immediately they'll say, "Oh, the Buccaneers," or maybe the Lightning, or the Tampa Bay Rays. It gives you an identity that certainly wasn't there before. And when I got here, one of the things that I noticed that they did every night that people just look at and think about this now, and you wouldn't even think about one of those things. And it would be, the Daily Quinella at the dog racing track, or the, some of the results from Highline. And, those type of things were regular parts of the sportscast back then, because that's what you had to cover. There was none of the other stuff. And when it came to baseball, you had, Florida State League Baseball, which all the top prospects did play in. But that was it. That's all you had, other than the Buccaneers and, the University of Florida and obviously, University of Florida is quite a ways from Tampa, but there's such a fan base here looking for that. And so, it's really grown. And that was one of the reasons I came here. I left San Diego, which is one of the most beautiful spots on earth, has everything you could ever want to cover, but it's extremely expensive. And I came here thinking that, the potential of being here and how this area can grow is incredible. And it certainly did exactly that.
So on your show, the Al Keck Show, every Sunday at 10 a.m. on 102.5 The Bone, you interview players from the past that played on the Buccaneers. And a lot of these players, it's very cool to hear because they were on bad teams, but they did a good job playing on a team. It was just a bad team. Now, during those years when you were covering the Buccaneers, when they were like really bad, what was the key to making your news report unique? Because I feel like if they lost 38-7, it's hard to cover it. So what would you do to bring an angle to keep the viewer watching about a team that sucked?
Well, you would always do your basic highlights and have fun with those, and you'd see the mistakes, and everyone would understand those, and you could make fun of those, and everyone had that. But what I would always try to do, even back then, was find a different story. There's got to be a different story going on in that game or with that team. Or here's an example. I remember the Bucs used to have a special teams coach, and his name was Joe Marciano. Awesome guy. And was, he was probably in his 40s at the time. And he wanted to have a son. He wasn't married, but he really wanted to have a son. And I find out that he went and adopted a little boy. And, that was just a little bit older than, most kids that are adopted. And he became a single dad. And the cool part was all the other wives of the Buccaneer, either players or coaches, they would chip in and help. So when they had an away game, again, Joe was a single dad, and he's going to be gone for a day and a half. So the other Bucs coaches' wives would chip in and babysit and be there for him. And it was kind of like a community, kind of like a team raising a kid. And so it was just, those type of stories were always around, and you could find those kind of stories. And I think before I got here, sometimes a new person coming in sees things a little differently, and maybe they're interesting to me. They wouldn't be interesting to other people. But if you tell the story right, then it can be something that would really be interesting to everybody. And so, that was the type of story that I would do.
Also, was your angle to never burn bridges? Because a lot of people that were in the media a long time, a lot of the sports writers, because I'm from Chicago and they were very aggressive there, a lot of the reporters kind of became like nobody wanted to be with them because they were just mean. And I feel like, tell me if I'm right, but I feel like your angle was you kind of wanted to be their friend so that they would want to like hang out with you. Because it's like really cool, all the guests you get on 102.5 The Bone. Like I can definitely tell you were big on making connections.
Well, it wasn't so much that my friend. I just wanted to be fair.
Yes.
Because I knew there would probably, could I have hung out with them, gone out to dinner with them, gone drinking with them, having fun that way? Absolutely, I could have done that. But I tried to stay away from that because I knew there would come a time when, one of the guys I'm, having a, out Saturday night with, having a few adult beverages, that next day or that next week, they might really have a bad game, and I've got to say so. So I don't want to do that to a friend. So we just don't become friends, but we would become friendly, and the main thing I wanted to be was fair. And so I felt that if I was fair, that, that people would respect me. And I think that's definitely the case because, what's fun about my show that I enjoy doing on Sundays is that I own the hour on one of the number one radio stations in the Southeast. So I can do whatever I want. And for me, that has done so much of this kind of stuff, I can do what I want. I can do it in a way that I want. I can interview the people that I want. And it really is a special type of feeling. That's the way I create, you know. A painter, an artist, you know, does it with their brush. You know, a singer sings, or, you know, a musician plays the piano. You know, for me, it's doing a broadcast. And so what I try to do is do it in a way that's entertaining, informative. Let's have fun. Let's enjoy this. And let's make this a very enjoyable hour. And, you know, I've been able to connect with people and over the years, I've been able to draw upon that and talk to people and interview people, because what I don't want to do is do a Buccaneers-centric show where, you know, I'm talking to the newspaper writer about, you know, getting his opinion on the game, you know. Well, I know as much about this as that guy, so why am I interviewing that guy? I want to interview someone that played quarterback. I want someone like Steve DeBerg or Steve Young, you know, guys that play, you know, like Steve Young, a Hall of Famer, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. And he's got some incredible stories about his years with the Buccaneers. And, you know, last week, I talked to a guy that wrote a book about the Buccaneers season last year, winning the Super Bowl. And he has incredible stories. We're going to have more stuff on that coming up, you know, this Sunday. And, you know, a story like this where the Bucs, they hit their bye week a year ago at 7-5. And the Buccaneer coaching staff thought, okay, you know, let's try to get this team to the playoffs. Let's try to turn these things around, because they had dropped, I think it was 3 or 4 going into the bye week. And they thought, let's right the ship. Let's find out what we're doing wrong. Let's get Tom Brady at the point to where he feels good about where he is with this offense and this team. And let's see if we can just make the playoffs. And once we make the playoffs, you know, we're going to set everything up for next year. And so they didn't think, this Buccaneer coaching staff really did not concentrate on making the Super Bowl last year until it got to be, you know, a couple of weeks away from the Super Bowl. But because they didn't think they were ready for that. They still thought they were going to be a year away. Whereas most Bucs fans are thinking, oh my gosh, we got Tom Brady. They're going to go to the Super Bowl. And we all know it wasn't that simple.
What I want to ask you too, Al, is like, so when you were doing TV in the 80s and 90s and 20 years ago, was there ever any like talk about what the future of the medium would look like? Like before the iPhone came out or social media, was there ever like people talking in the office about what it might look like before it happened, if that makes sense?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They had no real foresight into looking ahead, into thinking what media would be like today. And I believe I was in the golden age of television. Yeah. Because, I mean, as a guy that ran the sportscast in the evening, you know, my news director let me do whatever I wanted, go wherever I wanted, cover any story that I ever wanted in those early days, as long as I came back and brought back stories and content and that kind of stuff that they could run, you know. And if it was, you know, during a playoff time with some of the pro teams or that kind of stuff, we just made a special out of it, and they could sell it for 60 minutes. And, you know, when I was at Channel 28, the biggest, and I'm willing to bet it's still true, the biggest quarters that they had for the years that the Bucs won the Super Bowl and the Lightning won the Stanley Cup. And they were able to really make their budget and set things up for, you know, years to come. But back then, you didn't think about any of that kind of stuff. And I can remember traveling, in my early years here, going to a Bucks game and having probably 700 pounds worth of equipment, editing my camera equipment, big, huge crates and that kind of stuff. And you'd either fly it on the plane or you would ship it, days before, so that when you got to the city and you got into the hotel and set everything up, you could do your stories, edit them, and feed them back. In my last couple of years, all we had was a laptop, and so that's how things changed, and that's how the medium changed, and that's how things became so instantaneous. And most people back in the 80s just didn't, people in this business just didn't, they thought it was as big as it could possibly be at that point, and that, they really didn't think what it is now, where you've got your camera phone and, much of the newscast, they're running stuff that people shot on their, on their iPhone. So I don't think anybody saw that happening. I don't think anybody saw what this business was going to become, and that not only are newspapers becoming obsolete, but, evening newscasts are becoming obsolete because people don't want to wait until 5 or 6 or 11 o'clock at night to see the major stories, because you can see it instantaneously online.
When do you think the newspaper began to die, and when do you think the 5 p.m. news kind of began to switch? I think it was the middle of the last decade, pretty much when smartphones really began happening in 2012 to 2014. What do you think?
Well, I think actually the 5 o'clock news started becoming obsolete even before then, and newspapers long before then. I remember one time, the first year, 2008, when the Rays played in their first World Series, and they sent me to the American League playoffs. So they were playing, the Red Sox up in Boston. And so this general manager that I had said, hey, I really want you to start, shooting some of your stories off your iPhone, and, maybe even interview some people off that, and, send that stuff back. And I said to him, we've got $100,000 worth of equipment that shoots a lot better, that edits a lot quicker, that, looks like it's professional, as opposed to just shooting it off your phone, because it was nowhere near as effective as it is now. And so, I shot a couple things and sent it back. The general manager said, nah, that didn't work. I said, I told you. We've got the best equipment there is, and it beats anything going on right now in newspapers or, any other medium out there. So the problem is, people have become very accustomed to when there's a story, they're not going to wait for the 5 o'clock news or the 6 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news or even the noon news. They want to see it right now, and they can see it now online every bit as effectively as any newscast right now.
Did you ever think any news anchor, and I'm not even trying to get you to talk about coworkers, but did you ever think there was a certain arrogance that the main news anchor would have, where it was like he was kind of talking down to you? Do you ever feel like that was, because I've kind of felt that way growing up in Illinois. It felt like all the news anchors, there was a self-importance, and the viewers were like peasants.
Well, I don't know if it's that the viewers were peasants, but you've got to remember that back then, that the main anchor, or really any of the anchors, excuse me, were local personalities, and people saw them and had them, on TV in their homes every single night, sometimes 3 times a night. So that's very powerful.
Yeah.
And excuse me here. And, you would go out to dinner and people would stop by the, restaurant in a restaurant and stop by your table and want to talk about sports and all that stuff. They're trying to eat your dinner. I can remember, it's a little embarrassing, but it's true. I can remember I just had my third child. Kyle, Kyle.
Yeah.
He had just been born. And here I am, I'm thinking, I'm going to get a vasectomy. And it's a little TMI.
Yeah.
And so I went and got a vasectomy. Well, when I went to get the vasectomy, I'm in the examining room or the operating room or whatever. And I come in there, and again, everyone knew who I was. And, these nurses, they wanted pictures with me, to either for them or for their husbands or for their boyfriends and all that stuff. And I'm getting a vasectomy, And so, but that was just the way it was back then. And that's how crazy it was back then. But what that meant is that people were watching you. People knew who you were, and people cared about what you did. And that's something that people in any business you would enjoy and get a kick out of that. And it would be important because it's telling you not for your ego, but rather that you're doing a good job and people care about the job that you do and they like the job that you do and they see you several times a day.
Now, speaking of Kyle Keck, you can hear him doing hashtags every Sunday around 10:20 a.m. on 102.5 The Bone. But is it also true that he is now a father?
Yes, as in
crazy.
Wednesday night.
Yeah.
At 3:00 in the morning.
Oh, wow. That's early.
And, my beautiful daughter-in-law went into labor about 30 hours before and gave birth to this little guy that ain't a little guy. He is, he's a big one. And had shoulders so big that, as dad and grandfather, you just admire and say he's going to be a big kid. As a mother and a woman, they look at that as something else.
Yes.
As something very painful. So no, I'm very proud of my son, and I'm very, very proud of my new grandson. Now I have two grandkids, got 3 kids overall. And I'm, Ryan, two of my kids.
Yes.
So, how lucky I am and how much I love my kids.
Well, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show. You are the most organized and the most professional weekend show on 102.5 The Bone, along with Mike O. So keep up the good work. It's a blast doing your show.
Well, Ryan, it is an honor for me. And when I first learned I was going to be doing that show, one of the first things they told me is that, you're going to be in there with Ryan Hoppe, and he is one of our best people here, and you're going to enjoy working with him. Little did I know is that, that was only the start of it. I love working with you. I don't like working with you. Yeah. I love working with you, and you make it so much fun, so much easier, and it's just, you just make the experience awesome, and I can't thank you enough.
Awesome, Al. Means a lot, man. Well, whenever you want to come back on the show to talk about sports or whatnot, just let me know. Sounds good, Al?
You got it. Anytime, bud.
Awesome. Thank you, Al.
Thank you.